Hi, so in this video I'm going to go over secondary stats as they're going to work in Legion. Now, it's actually quite a big change coming in. Just to go back to when the last time there was a big change, which was right at the beginning. Secondary stats in vanilla used to be flat percentage increases on gear. You used to have, I'll go over like crit and haste because I think they're the only two constant secondary stats that have just always been in the game. And you might see on it plus 2% crit or plus 1% crit. To the point where sometimes, even as a level 60 raider, you might get the odd blue, like level 40 odd piece of gear being used just because it had this maybe 1 or 2% crit on it, which was actually very powerful. Now, when Burning Crusade was going to come out, the first expansion, Blizzard knew they had to sort this out. You can't have people using gear that's way, way below in terms of the sort of level required. So what they did is came up with ratings for these things. So you needed a certain amount of rating for 1%. From memory, I think it was about 14 rating at level 60. And then the idea is that to maintain 1% crit or 1% haste or 1% whatever, be like hit and dodge then as well, you needed a higher and higher rating as your level went up. Now, the consequence of this, anyone who's played through a few expansions will know this, because that system has remained the same since then. The actual secondary stats we have has changed. Some have been removed, some have been added, some have been added and then removed again. But the way the rating works has changed, has basically been the same. Hasn't changed at all. So what happens is, and it's particularly noticeable if you're in really good gear. So you have certain percentages in your favourite stats, might be mastery, haste, crit, whatever. And then you level up. And those percentages come down a bit because you're in largely the same gear. You're not upgrading your gear very often. If it was very good to start with, it will take quite a long time before you really do start upgrading. The initial quest items are not likely to be upgrades. And so these values just come down. Now, if you have abilities that interact very strongly with these secondaries, such as effects, abilities proccing off crits, for example, then you notice that this isn't happening as often. You could literally get to a situation where you have like 70% in a particular stat, maybe crit, and you're getting things proccing all the time. And then after a few levels, it's down to like 20%, and it's not proccing so much. And you're actually literally weaker. Even though you've gone up a few levels, you are weaker than you were, and you feel weaker. Now, that is one of the areas that Blizzard want to address first of all. They want to smooth out the leveling process so that you're not plummeting down with these secondary stats. Of course, they can't keep them level because then you'd end up at level cap with really high values, which they don't want, because that's one of the other things they want to stop. They want us to stop getting these really high levels in the first place. So if your particular favourite stat is mastery or haste or crit or whatever, they don't want us being able to, especially with the best raid gear on offer, they don't want us getting up to godlike values where we're getting anywhere near 100%. And then abilities are just not working as they're supposed to work in because it's like guaranteed proc on something. So what they're going to do is they're going to smooth it out of the leveling process so it doesn't feel as much of a penalty as you level up. But then when we get to level cap, the gear as you go up there, they're going to massively reduce the amount of secondary stats on the budget on the items itself. So as you go up your item levels with level cap gear, you won't be getting as many of the secondary stats as we've been used to in previous expansions. You'll be getting more of the primary stats. So the primary stats will go up at a greater rate than secondary stats if you want to think of it like that. Okay. If we have a look at this, Blizzard sort of give an idea about some numbers they've been throwing around. They say, you know, Warlords of Draenor, you start your endgame experience with round about 15% of your favourite stat. I'll take the word for that. I can't really check that. And 7.5 in the other stats. And then they say when you end up with something like about 50% of your favourite stat and 20% of other stats. That's actually pretty close to the mark. If I look at my gear now, and I'm in like fully upgraded, Valor upgraded, mythic gear, fair, you know, some Warforged, some socketed, but it's good quality mythic raiding gear, and that's pretty bang on. Or if we say like it's not like 20% in each of my non-favourite stats. But if we say an average of 20%, it's pretty close to the mark. So they're definitely correct on that one. And what they argue is, and we know this, anyone who's played the game knows this, the inflation in stats massively increases. In a way, it's just as well, I suppose, that we're not getting a third tier of raiding in this expansion, because goodness knows what the difference is. And this is difficult, I think, like from a balancing point of view for the leveling content. I mean, the leveling content for some of us who raid, for example, you can argue is not as important. I really like it, I have to say, but it's something to get through really quickly. For a lot of players, though, it's a big part of the game itself. And trying to think of it from this point of view, how do you balance mobs to be doable if you've just leveled up? I'm leveling up a mage at the moment. I'm not using a boost for this one. When I get to level 100, I'll probably be in round about 600 item level gear, largely on the strength of heirlooms and the 3 crafted items I can have. It'll be round about 600, maybe slightly over. My paladin, my main, is in round about 744 item level. That's a huge difference. But both of them have got to do that same leveling content when Legion comes out. It's difficult to balance, isn't it? So that the person... Sorry about the noise outside. I've got the window up. It's really hot here. The person who's got level 600 item level has to be able to kill those mobs without dying all the time for leveling. But you don't want the level 740 odd player just mincing straight through them. So you can also argue this is with future expansions in mind, thinking about the leveling, because maybe they've just got completely sick of having to balance these things out. It can be, you know, it's obviously not going to be an easy thing. I mean, once you've got a few quests under your belt, maybe not so bad, because that 600 item level player has now got a lot more of the quest items, which brings them right up to speed. But you've got to complete some quests to be able to do that. The next thing they sort of said here is what I've just mentioned before about the conversion rating. So the conversion rating for secondary stats will not go up as much as they otherwise would, and by a lot. They don't want mages and warriors getting the huge crit values. They don't want, presumably, retribution paladins getting huge mastery values or haste values. So they are really going to, you know, you're going to notice as you go up like 10 item levels at a time, you're not going to get as much of an increase in secondary stats as we have been used to in the past few expansions. It will seem a bit strange. And the final sort of consequence of this is they say from their point of view it'll be easier to tune the classes, because they say the problem is that what's traditionally happened at the start of expansions is people don't have enough of the stats, so they don't feel as engaging as they will do later on. And then they hit the sweet spot, which is where things are round about right. And then quite quickly you get even better gear and end up with, as they call it, the crazy levels of these secondary stats that allow them to do things that Blizzard really didn't want you doing on a regular basis. Removing multi-strike, they say, is part of this. Of course, multi-strike is not going to be with us in Legion. Hasn't really been replaced with a different one. We're just going to be left with haste, mastery, crit, and versatility. And of course, bonus armor and spirit for tanks and healers, respectively. So what they're saying is that at the end of the expansion, we'll still have round about 50% in our favourite stat and about 20% in the others. And you think, well, that's the same as now, isn't it? But bearing in mind, we've got one secondary stat fewer. Okay, so there's one less there. So the overall secondary stats, if we lump them all together, will be less, and it will be significantly less. So that's how the secondary stats are going to work. So get used to your primary stats going up at a greater rate than your secondary stats. Also get used to the fact that you are, or the intention is at any rate, and Blizzard are not stupid, I'm sure if this is their intention they'll be able to do it, that you're not going to be able to get up to the crazy levels that maybe you are at the moment. But at the same time, in the early part of an expansion, you're not going to have really small levels either that make it like you're running through treacle as you're playing, especially if haste is your thing. So just a quick update on that. Let me know what you think. If you've got any further questions, feel free to put them in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And if you don't like, comment why. And until next time, I'll see you later.